Hey guys, it's Lazy, and you know what time it is. It's alt leveling time. I do this every league. I look for the best alt leveling setup that you can use. One setup to level multiple alt characters, and surprise surprise, Holopalm is now the best new way to level your alt characters. In the background here, you can kind of see that I level with a warrior, and I go through the whole campaign in just 5 hours and 30 minutes. Now, supposedly, warrior should be one of the worst class when it comes to level with Holopalm. From the starting point of the warrior class, it takes 28 points to travel all the way from there to the Holopalm keystone. So rest assured, if I'm able to make this work on a warrior, you should have no problem making it work for other class as well. And as a matter of fact, I leveled this with a witch, and you can kind of see the insane damage that we do in the campaign already. And we pretty much one-shot all bosses. Alright, so if you are interested, let's talk about the setups. Essentially, Holopalm out-leveling setups is I use Monk skill, and it is very similar to my 0.1 Pillar of the Cage God setups, except this time we have exceptional scaling, so our damage is actually so much better than before. The setup I do is also class agnostic, which means you don't need to pick any certain ascendancies for this to work. All you need to do is create your characters, follow my written guide because I do a customized details written guide for every class. Every class will have a slight different variant of progression path, but ultimately we are using the same gear setups. So whenever you are done with leveling one of your alt characters and you want to level another class, you just need to pick up the same gear set and use it again. I also set up the guide to use minimal swapping, which means that we are following a very simple skill trees. We will swap to Holopalm as soon as we can. Beside the warrior, it takes 28 levels and you have to do a little bit of respect. But every other class should look a lot better. And Holopalm by itself have insane scaling, like I said. The DPS in the campaign is exceptionally better than the 0.1 version of Pillar of the Cage God, and also the 0.2 Wreck and Stomping Ground setups that we used to run. Both of the previous version have certain issues for scaling into the late game, but I'm happy to say Holopalm does not have any of that. Alright, next up we have the written guide. And again, I have write this one for all the variants. So in here, for example, is a witch variant. But I do have the setups for Sorcerers, Monk, Huntress, Ranger, Mercenaries, Warriors, so all 7 classes. And for each of them, there are different depending on what class you choose. I have break it down by act as well. So we have Act 1 setup, Act 2, 3, 4, and the interlude. So you just need to follow that. The act is also breakdown by the levels. And in here I have a very detailed setups. Essentially tell you what to equip and what level. If you plan to follow the build guide, just make sure you go through all the variants and pick up all the gears that need to be picked up. I pretty much describe them very details. For the unique items, you don't really need to care. But for example, if you want to follow ray items, I tell you what stat is required and what is the optional stats. And if you go down here to the skill gem sections, I have also break this down on very detailed by act on what skill you use, the rotations, and how to play the build. I'll mention that briefly a bit later in the video. And then we have the passive skill trees, essentially also break down by the act as well. Act 1, 2, 3, 4, and the interludes. Now, beside the passive skill trees, make sure you also take a look at the notable priorities. I have reorganized them so that it makes sense, and I want you to take it in the orders that I set it up there so that you will get the best out of your passive skill trees. And finally, we have the attributes. Essentially, this is a monk build, so you want certain amounts of intelligence and dexterity. You can put the rest of your skill points into strength to have a little bit more life to help survive later in the game. Finally, if you find any information discrepancy between this video and the written guide, always assume the written guide is the most up-to-date because I can't go back and update the video. If you find any information is missing or wrong, just let me know and I will update the written guide as well because I have go through the acts very details, but sometimes I might miss some information somewhere, so just let me know and I'll update the guide accordingly. Alright, so I have here my newly characters that I just finished the campaign with in about 5 hours and 30 minutes. As you can see here, this is my warrior. And the items, I have kind of laid it out here so we can talk about the items. And the items for this particular characters is actually very simple because of how we scale Hollow Palm damage, and I will talk about it. But first, you can kind of see here that I'm using 2 sets of unique items, and this is only for the warrior because we do need to survive the game until level 28 because we use the Pillar of the Cage God in the early game. So Grey Mech, Titan Rod, Everlasting Gaze, those unique items help us survive until the level 28 that we can make the swap to Hollow Palm. And whenever we make it to level 28 and swap into Hollow Palm, it's gonna feel a lot smoother. So if you are playing the warrior, just kind of hang on until you get to level 28, and pretty much it's gonna be up only from there. For any other class and ascendancies, we can just kind of use all these items right here, and it's a lot simpler. Now, what you need to know is that we will swap into Hollow Palm as soon as we can, which means that we do have to run with Pillar of the Cage God for the early part of the game. This staff was nerfed in 0.2, but it doesn't really matter because we are only use it for the early part of the game and it should be completely fine. The way we scale this is still with strength, but we don't actually have to spec a lot into strength. This is because we can leverage the early game flat damage that we get from our twin setups. So you can definitely run these setups until level 14 or 15 without much issues and finish Act 1 with it. Now this is what we use at level 1. We are using Wings of Selene to help us equip Fog Shades. I choose to use Fog Shades from level 1 to level 60, but later on you can definitely swap this with a better ES and Evasion body armor. And then for the early game, I'm also using the Blackheart Rings for that extra flat damage. But as soon as we can get our hand on the items that helps with scaling damage for Hollow Palms, we will swap to it immediately. The way we scale Hollow Palm damage is that you can kind of see here for Hollow Palm, physical damage is based on the skill level. So the way we scale it for the campaign is going to be increased skill level, and we have many ways to do it, especially if we are playing melee skills. The first thing here is Crown of the Victor, and we use it from level 5. This gives +1 to level of all skills, so we already have +1 level of all skill at level 5, and it's very strong. We can get +1 level of all melee skills on the amulet as well, starting from level 8. On all of our amulet, we are going to anoint that with a very cheap anointment, Sharpened Claw, to give 25% increased attack damage. And doesn't really matter what you get on the amulets, the only thing you care about is +1 to level of all melee skills. Later on, at around level 32 breakpoint, your amulet can roll +2 to level of all melee skills, and you can start buying them and anointing them. And at level 60, you get access to +3 level of all melee skills, and those are the breakpoint for the melee skills of the amulet. Now, next up, we have Living Stones, and this is the only ring in the game that actually give us the +1 to level of skills that actually benefits us, and is also the reason why we choose to go with a Lightning Monk setups. And it just happened that Lightning Monk setup is pretty good as well, so that is definitely a plus. So yeah, Living Stone, +1 level of all lightning skills, and it just happened that all of our skills is lightning based, so we will be benefits from this particular ring, and if we use them as attacking skills, it's gonna gain a lot of physical flat damage from the Hollow Palm Keystone. Now for the belt, I am currently using Measure Girdle, and I don't find a reason to swap out belt, so I will just keep it simple and only use one belt from level 1 to level 60. Now for the early part of the game, we are using North Paw for that extra physical damage to attack, but as soon as you can get your hands on a level, I think it's item level 8, for a +1 level of all melee skills, you're gonna swap your glove to that. Now you can also get this with an enchantment, +1 to level of all melee skill as a Corrupted Implicit, and it can be expensive, but I'm just letting you know, if you get your hand on this, it's a premium options for the early game. Later on, at around level 32 plus, you also get access to +2 to level of all melee skills, and if you can get your hands on a glove like this with the Vow of Implicits, +1 to level of all melee skills, it's gonna be pretty insane. And you also get this at higher levels, so you might as well get some higher flat damage on this as well. Look for physical and lightning specifically because we are playing lightning build. And yeah, that is pretty much the whole setups. I think it's quite simple and intuitive. Hollow Palm scale of skill levels, and we are going as deep as we can into increased skill level, which in turn give us so much flat physical damage from our skills, which is enough to help us scale into the later part of the campaigns and never fall off in terms of damage. Now, we are using Luminous Pace in the early part of the game, but as soon as we get to level 11, we swap to Wanderlust, and I use Wanderlust for the rest of the campaign, even though you have some better options with higher move speed a bit later. And for the jewels, we are using Gain 1 Rage on melee hit on the Ruby jewels. So this is probably the most important light that you need to get because it gives you extra damage because for extra rage. But that's pretty much it. You can also get increased melee damage on here as well, but it's not as important, but you might as well get it. This whole setup is actually quite budget, and it's a lot simpler than the previous version that we have. Wreck and Stomping Ground have a lot of swap, and also Pillar of the Cage God have a little part that people usually don't understand, and a few variants that might confuse people. But this setup is quite simple and straightforward. We are stacking plus level 2 skills, and that is enough for us to go all the way with Hollow Palm until the end of the campaign. Now, on a side note, if you are able to get your hand on a Prism of Belief, get a +3 to level of Stormwave, and you can probably just use Stormwave to full clear the campaign without much issues. Now we can discuss on how to play the build. It's actually quite simple since we are playing an alt leveling setups. You don't need to overcomplicate a thing if you don't want to. You can simply just use Falling Thunder for AoE clear and clear everything in the early game just with one button. Now, if you want to be fancy and you want to use combo, you can use Killing Palm to generate power charges by killing monster with the Killing Palm, and then spend the power charge with Falling Thunder to create extra projectiles, and this can shotgun bosses AoE clear much more efficient than the normal Falling Thunder. Now, at level 14, you unlock Flurry Strikes and Tempest Belt, and you can use this combo for single target damage, but once again, it is optionally, and you can definitely just use Falling Thunder as well at this point to do the damage. Tempest Flurry and Tempest Belt sometimes has a pretty awkward hitbox, so it can be pretty hard to hit both the boss and the bell at the same time, so it is ultimately up to your preference. In 0.3, there are usually a bunch of Abyss in every maps, so having good AoE clear is actually quite important. So just before you get access to Stormwave, you can use the combo of Killing Palm and Thunderfall to generate a lot of AoE clear. We have Herald of Thunder with Living Lightning to do a lot of cleave and AoE chip damage. Then you can use Killing Palm to finish the enemy off and then spend the power charge on Thunderfall, where it's gonna create multiple projectiles which can easily destroy the Abyss. At level 22, you have access to Stormwave and you have access to Branching Fissure as well. Branching Fissure is the brand new support gems in 0.3, and it's actually a game-changing for Stormwave in particular because it makes Stormwave viable for single target damage as well, because the Fissure do shotguns on big targets. But you should also know that it will not do as much damage as Tempest Flurry and Tempest Belt. Eventually, you will have access to Charge Staff. This is one of the core skills in our setups, and you need to keep this buff on as much as possible because it do a lot of damage. Before getting to Lingering Illusions, we are using the Killing Palm skill to finish them off just like that. With the power charge, we gotta activate Charge Staff, and then you will easily tell the difference between not having this buff and having this buff. But the main way to gain charge in our setup is from Lingering Illusions, and once you have access to Lingering Illusions, all you need to do is do a dodge roll. Make sure that the illusion that you leave behind get hit by the monsters, and you should get your power charge. This is very simple, effective, and you can also use it during the boss fight as well, because if you time it correctly, the boss gonna hit the illusions and give you power charge during the fight. And that is pretty much how you can sustain your power charge during the boss fight. Here's how the gameplay loop looked like in the later part of the campaign. This is in Act 4. Essentially, we are using dodge roll to create the lingering illusions, but also to avoid the enemy. With the power charge from lingering illusions, you should have no problem keeping your chest uptime at 100%, and then you just use Stormwave to fully AoE clear. Now, it is worth noting that later on in the game, we can be quite squishy, but this is not really because of the build, even though we don't spec into defensive node. This is mainly because I'm using a level 1 Fog Shades at this point still. If you want to feel more tanky and comfy in your map, make sure that you go ahead and buy an ES, an evasion body armor. The more evasion you have, it also helps a little bit with the attack speed on hollow palms, and it's definitely gonna feel a lot more comfy. I wanna just keep it simple, and also I want to have more move speed, which is why I choose to go with Fog Shades, because I don't mind dying randomly here and there. A small tips for you when fighting the late game boss: sometimes the boss can be extra rippy if you try to be in melee range. So even though Tempest Flurry and Tempest Belt is the best combo for you to do damage, sometimes it might be better for you to stay at range and poke with Storm Wave. Technically, Storm Wave also build up the stun bar rather quickly, so you can kind of just use Storm Wave to poke until the boss is stunned, and then you can kind of move in and use the normal combo for a lot of damage. Or if you prefer to just use Storm Wave to do damage, it is completely fine as well, because in our hollow palm setups, our damage once again do not fall off, and you have enough mana regens and everything to just use Storm Wave for the whole fight. And with that, I think I have shared everything I want to share on this particular setups. Now for the warrior enjoyer, all I gotta say is just try to hang on for the first 28 to 30 level. It's gonna get a lot better, and as you can kind of see in my particular setups, I am also able to finish the campaign in about 5 hours, doing all the side quests and everything needed to be done. And also, I think if you are playing the warrior, you might get extra lucky, like how I get the divine orb drop right here. But with that, thank you so much for watching, guys. Enjoy the leveling build guy, have fun, and I will see you in the next one.